So let me turn on these other parts. David is going to do. If something shows up inappropriate. Yes, ma'am.
I have a question. By any chance, did the interior hardware on the doors and so on come from the Durham nail factory?
I'm going to defer that question to David Willock.
Where they?
The question she asked was, is there any nails or hardware on the interior of the house that come from, I'm assuming you're asking about Tremont Nail Company?
That's right.
Yeah, and I'm sure there is. The house has been through a multitude of modifications, so you've got groups of hardware that start in the rock hardware period, like I was saying earlier, go back from time disremembered, and cut nails start showing up in sort of a mass production mode around 1810, and this house is full of that stuff. And we're finding evidence of cut nails even on the site on the other side of the property. So to answer your question, yes.
Well, I was thinking also of the hinges and things like that.
I'm sure there are, yeah.
You took that out of the computer.
Oh,
You can have point to it.
Okay, so now we have found this, what looks to a lot of people, myself and a lot of my colleagues and friends that are familiar with timber framing technology and architecture and all kinds of things. There's a lot of people that are starting to lean towards a 17th century sort of structure. There was dendrochronology done that was inconclusive. The only thing they would say is quite possibly mid-century, but they wouldn't put anything in writing yet because the master they have over at Oxford just wouldn't date the house. When I called a colleague of mine that I work with him on a regular basis. We're working in Yarmouth currently. Who is a professional archaeologist. He has his own professional archaeological company. He travels all throughout New England. And I brought him over to look at this structure, and he was immediately taken with it. And immediately, today the house is facing the street. It's in a perfect line with Water Street. Everything, the way the house is situated, in most cases, I would say probably over 90% of the first period structures have a north-south juxtaposition. The front of the house is generally facing due south, with the back of the house facing north. And even way back from the 17th century, they're using sunlight to their advantage with that north-south fix. The sunlight's going to help keep the house a little warmer. The living quarters, the sitting areas, sleeping areas are generally in the front of the house. And the living part of the structure, the daily activity, dairying, cooking, all that kind of activity is in the back of the house on the north side because it's obviously cooler. This house is facing all the wrong directions. Nothing looks right about it. So we immediately asked Tom and Melissa if they would allow us to do a survey around the property itself. Because the first thing we thought in talking with other friends and colleagues was maybe the house got turned at some point on its original site to do, in the 19th century, the classical alignment of a house is with the street because you want to show off the facade. And they acquiesced. They said, sure. They were a little leery about it. Everybody gets leery about archaeology because they immediately think the FBI and the Indians and everybody will show up and seize your property if you find it, which is not the case. Private property is private property. It doesn't matter what you find. Obviously, if you find burials, you can't dig them up and throw them in the trash can. You have to leave them where they are and notify somebody. So we started doing surveys, and this is a little test we do. We've done this whole site using the metric system, and these units, the test units, are 50 by 50 centimeter units. And what we're looking for is any kind of evidence, structural as well as material culture, that would tell us that there was any kind of activity around this house in the 1600s. And we find absolutely nothing. We did, can we go to that next? I think we have another yard. No, that's,
I think these are the two.
yeah, that's it. Okay, that's fine. So we did, but we did, I think we did 30 test units right across, and the poor guy, we immediately trashed his front lawn. But we backfilled them all nicely. But we find absolutely no evidence of any kind of occupation in the 17th century. There's no material culture whatsoever. Everything we're finding actually starts dating to the early 19th century, and then later all the way up to, we were finding coins from the 1960s and things like that. But so we're kind of flummoxed. We're like, now what do we do? And when we happened to do this survey was late in March, and there were no leaves on any of the trees. And Craig and I were kind of standing in the side yard of Tom's house, scratching our heads, and we're looking out towards Shaw Pond. And it was, with all the leaves down, you could see perfectly the Hoxie house. I mean, it was just a beautiful little vista. And off to the side of this beautiful little vista up against Shaw Pond is this little knoll. And Craig and I looked at each other, and I said, I'll bet if this house was anywhere near this site where it is today, it was over on that little hummock. And he totally agreed. He said, you know, I think you're right. That's just a perfect 17th century house site. I mean, it's got everything you'd want. It's got a fresh water source nearby. It's on a little knoll. It's got good drainage. There's fairly good agricultural ground around it. And we had no idea at that point who owned it. And so Tom came out and we told him, we said, you know, it's too bad you didn't own that piece of property over there. That's probably where your house was. He said, well, actually I do. So again, we put the question to him. Do you mind if
Tear up your lawn some more?
would it be okay if we dug another hole? And so, again, he agrees.
That's the understatement of the night.
So you can go to the next frame. So he agrees, and quite a bit later, Craig and I go over to this particular site, and we walked around the parameter of it, and sort of, it was kind of like a coin toss. Where do we want to sink the first test unit? And again, these test units are little, tiny, 50 by 50 centimeter, really quick and easy units. This young lady is another archaeologist that I've been working with all week. She's very familiar with these. We've got probably 60 of them in the last 3 days. So we start digging in this very first unit. And the first thing we find is a Native American quoit from probably about 3,000 years ago. And Tom was standing there at the time, and he was just kind of dumbfounded. He's like, how do you guys figure this stuff out? And then all of a sudden, underneath that, we start finding 17th century bricks. And we know they're 17th century bricks because the profile of a 17th century brick, if you looked in the exhibit case when you came in this evening, I think we have a couple in there. And they're a lot larger than bricks that you might see today. There were actual standards that were set by guild members in England. And there is a brick standard that dates to the 17th century. And the majority of the bricks made are supposed to be, I don't quote me on the exact measurement, but 9 by 4 by 2 or 4.5. But they're very, very large brick. And by the close of the 17th century, certainly by 1720, these bricks start getting progressively smaller. So 17th century bricks are very easy to pick out from others. So we start finding those, and then that's when things kind of take off on us rapidly. We do what's called, when you drop a test kit in an area and you find artifacts and you find concentrations of artifacts, you do what's called an array. And an array, in a kind of a short and quick, dirty way of explaining it without getting technical, is you kind of lay out a star grid. You imagine the points of a star, and you go whatever you decide. Greg's the principal archaeologist of this particular site. I'm his lackey. So what we did was we decided, I think it was, to do a half-meter array around the original test pit. And this is what we start picking up. We're picking up rubble. And this is just local field stone that's coming out of the glacial moraine that they're using. Probably at this point we don't know what we're looking at, but we're guessing it's demo footings for a foundation. So this, we keep expanding this unit, and we're finding a lot of demolition material. Very few artifacts. We found a couple of random pieces of 17th century and 18th century pottery, a few pipe stems, but nothing really terribly exciting. You get kind of used to finding that stuff. But you can just click it up kind of much. But then we start finding stuff that's in its original situation. It's got some form to it. It's starting to look like something. It's not just rubble. It's starting to look like there's a piece of something that was built here at some point. And again, these units are all expansions on those original test pits. And you can see, even though maybe not from the back of the room, but on this side of the unit, the little arrow is indicating north, but there's an awful lot of brick rubble full of clamshell mortar that's starting to come out of the soil as well. So now we know we're definitely in the proximity of a house. We're not just working in a rubble pile outside of proximity of a house. And so,
good, explain this one.
yeah, this is horrible. One of the great things about archaeology is 9 times out of 10 when you make an interpretive guess, you're going to be wrong. The good archaeologists, even if any of you are familiar with archaeology, there's probably one of the more famous historic archaeologists in the States anyway, is Ivanhoe Hume, and he was very good about, he would just immediately start making these really grand assumptions and start deciding he knew exactly what he was doing, and then 3 days later he would find out he was absolutely dead wrong. But he was very good about being kicked under the bus. He was very good about laughing at himself. And we kind of fell into the same trap. We'd start pontificating to Tom, telling him we knew what we were doing, and then 2 days later would have to tell him that, no, we're not anywhere close to what we thought. But at one point, we actually got kind of courageous enough to, we really thought we had this thing nailed. We knew what we were doing. We weren't idiots either. So we go ahead and we lay out what we think are the contours of the house based on pretty minimal evidence. And even still today, Craig and I were looking at these photographs a few weeks ago. And it was like, what were we thinking? And immediately we both looked at, what do you mean, what were we thinking? You know, it was your idea. But this is, looking at this today is the most absurd, I mean, it's literally borderline embarrassing thing that
Which is why we put it up.
Yeah, I knew it was coming, but, so this is basically theoretical garbage that you're looking we started to decide, in order to understand this house and try to figure out where it is, we need to find the heart of the household, the hearth.